So we've got Rafael in Sweden. You're on with Jim and Matt. How can we help?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
So first of all, thanks for taking my call.
Sure, welcome.
I basically, I wanted to challenge one of your questions when it comes to morality. Okay.
Okay.
The thing is, I'm not a theist nor an atheist.
Well, that's not possible. That's not possible. Those are the only two options, Rafael. Those are the.
You're correct.
Because Rafael, a theist is someone who believes that there's a God, and a non-theist, an atheist, is someone who does not believe there's a God. So there's no other option.
Absolutely, you're correct. I phrased that wrong.
It's fine. I'm clarifying for everybody else. Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah, I'm more like an agnostic theist, if you will. Like I have been pondering about this question for like over 5 years, and I've watched your show actually, over 10 years, and you have changed my mind from being a theist, like a real theist, to becoming more of an agnostic, right? Because I mean, for me, I'm trying to learn the truth, right? And I've been thinking particularly about morality, okay? And I have listened to your lectures and your debates when it comes to morality, and I have this one specific thing that I've been thinking about, and for me, it didn't make sense, really. So if I understood your position correctly, like morality is when you want to maximize well-being overall. So my question is, let's say hypothetically, if we take like Hitler, for example, he thought that like eliminating the Jews would maximize the well-being not only for Germany, but for the entire planet. So my question would be, would Hitler therefore be justified for his actions? If we
was he right?
That this is the definition.
Was Hitler actually correct that the world would be better off with the Jews exterminated?
Of course not, but he thought so.
Well, then why are you asking the question? If you're willing to say, of course not, that he wouldn't have been correct, then there's no question.
From my point of view, I think, from my point of view, I of course disagree with that, with what he did. But let's say that he was convinced that in order to maximize well-being,
it doesn't make a difference.
I need to eliminate. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference whether or not Hitler thought he was right. The question is, was he right? So what you told the call screener when you were asking was, you want to challenge this position on morality. And the question you asked was, who decides what well-being is? Well, nobody. Yeah. We decide that the answer is not a who. You've asked the wrong question. Who decides what well-being is? That's not a who. We decide that we're going to care about well-being, and it is the physical facts of the universe that dictate whether or not something is in our best interest. It's not an opinion that if I cut off your head, your life just ended, so it can't possibly be better, and barring some circumstances where it was the most moral thing to do. But generally speaking, health is better than sickness. Health is better than harm. Life is preferable to death. These are our preferences. And so when we're talking about what's in our best interest with regard to well-being, we are appealing to the facts of the universe. And the facts of the universe are that while Hitler may have been convinced that exterminating all the Jews was going to be better for everybody, there is no demonstration of that fact. And there are facts that contradict that, in the intervening time, Jews have contributed much to the society and all of us, not the least of which is that if we have a society where one nation state can indiscriminately decide that another culture is worth exterminating, and you do this without checks, then you've lost the foundation of individual autonomy and respect for individual rights, which is, if you eliminate those rights, that is in conflict with our well-being. Those are the things that cause revolts, that make people suicidal, that make people not want to live, by taking away their basic freedoms and autonomy. And so once we recognize that it begins with that basic freedom and autonomy, there's still a lot of work to do, but it's not somebody deciding, well-being is this. It's kind of like physical health. While there are people who are allergic to peanuts, generally speaking, are good for me and good for other people, or at least healthier than battery acid to most of us. And it's not a matter of opinion. And we didn't need somebody to come in. And it's like saying, who defined what it means to be a healthy human? And the truth is, plenty of experts in the field of health are arguing and agreeing and disagreeing at all times about what generally is considered healthy. And that's the best we can do. There's no problem with secular morality that is solved by appealing to a God, because even your question, if we agreed that we're going to care about well-being and somebody said, God cares about well-being. Well, first of all, prove it. But if I care about well-being and God cares about well-being, then God is irrelevant. And the only thing that matters is the well-being.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, so if I understood you correctly, like, is it the case that, like, is it like society in general? So is it like the general consensus of what well-being is that defines well-being? Have I understood you correctly?
No, there's actual things you can measure about well-being. You can measure the health of the body. You can measure the health of the mind. Some people go as far as to say happiness, and I actually prefer happiness to well-being, and Matt and I aren't that far off on our definitions. But these are things that you can actually measure. So you can actually go and measure how happy somebody is. And if you do that across a society, you can figure out what kinds of things make things happy. And as it turns out, Harvard has been studying happiness for 80 some odd years now and has a pretty good handle on what makes people happy. And so you can focus on measuring these things and moving forward. So again, it's not a who decides, it's a what can science provide us in terms of definitions of happiness and well-being, and then how do we measure those?
Okay, so let's say hypothetically that a society or a country or a person or whatever thinks that eliminating a portion of a population to maximize the well-being for the 99% of the population.
Well, so the problem that we have is that because it's humans making the decision, we're probably going to screw it up, which is why we want objective facts. And you could take a statement like that where you could say, all right, we have to eliminate this section of society for well-being. And you can actually look at that and go, is this really, really true? So let's take the extreme case where we either eliminate half of the population or the entire population starves. That's a very objective case where you can say, okay, if this is the case, and this is entirely just a thought experiment, right? So we can control the variables. But let's say that is the case. It's either half the people die or all the people starve. That's pretty easy to go, okay, then we just need to figure out what is the best way to maximize happiness and well-being in that thought experiment, right? But if it's just because you don't like people who have blue eyes or whatever, that's a lot harder to justify and to measure and say, what does someone being Jewish, for instance, have to do with anything? What does any of these properties that we're born into have to do with our actions and what is going on around in the world around us? So that makes it much harder to justify genocide and things like that, because you just don't have any good basis to do so.
Yeah, I agree with that point. And of course, like right now in hindsight, we know that that's horrible. But let's say like in Germany back then, there was a huge portion of the population that thought that this was indeed the way to go.
And they were wrong.
In that case,
they were wrong.
Right now, of course, they were wrong. Yeah, of course. But they did not think they were wrong. So like how does one reconcile like how do objectively say even if the majority was thinking like that, they are wrong and we can stampede over them? Like, do you understand what I mean?
Well, so you simply go back and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to know more about the human condition tomorrow than we do today. This is simply a fact. So decisions we make today may in fact be wrong from what we find out tomorrow. And there's nothing we can really do about that except to do the best that we can with what we have. And religion doesn't actually answer any of these questions, right? You could take my thought experiment of, either the entire population dies of starvation or half the population dies. Religion doesn't really give us a good answer to that, except other than pray to God that he'll change the situation, right? That's your response in religion.
Or it's all happening according to God's plan.
Right. Yeah. Everybody
God
dies.
wanted you to get cancer and die because he needed to have, or wanted your child to get cancer and die because he needed your child in heaven. Or God wanted you to have a hard time so that you would be able to help somebody else because God's too lazy to actually help somebody else. So he wants to punish you so that you will be useful to somebody else.
Right. So, appealing to a God does not help you with hard questions.
It doesn't help you with any of the questions because, if your question, let's assume that your initial question of who defines well-being was a correct understanding. It's not, but let's assume it was. Then all of a sudden, I would say human beings would be the ones who would define this. And the God believers are saying God's the one that defines this. But I don't have access to a God or what a God says. I only have access to what other people are saying. And so what's really happening is those people are telling me what their opinion is, just as I'm telling them what my opinion is. They're just saying that their opinion is better because it's backed by a God that they can't prove. Well, I mean, Jim and I could run around. Oh, Jim and I, there we go again.
We're not twins.
Myself and Jim could run around saying, we have a different God who told us this. And then you would have, those theists would have to, their only argument would be, well, yours isn't the one true God. Well, congratulations. So theists with every objection have all the work still in front of them.
Yeah, I actually agree with you there. And the thing is, like for me, I care about the truth. So I like to think about these things and get as close to the truth as possible. So I agree with 90% or 99% of what you say, when it comes to the religious, because I see a lot of bullshit there, a lot of for instance, the cancer, the thing, you mentioned. Well, I mean, if we really think about it, God actually decided for this baby to have cancer. So, and at the same time, it's actually a lot of things, right? But when it comes to this specific morality question, I have been thinking about this, whenever I saw your lectures, and that's why I couldn't really solve it. I couldn't really come to a conclusion. That's why I called. So, but now I know a little bit more how you think, and thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely, thank you, Rafael. We're gonna let you go and move on.
There's an interesting point here to make is that when theists, especially Christians, say they have an objective morality, they mean the word objective in one of the rarer usages of the word, which means to come from outside. Whereas when we use objective, once we've accepted a subjective standard and we use the word objective, we mean it in the more common sense of we can actually measure it.
Yeah, for me, the distinction between objective and subjective is how much of an individual thinking agent's opinion impacts it.
Right.
And when they appeal to a God, while it is they're appealing to something that is objectively not them, they are still appealing to something if it is in fact real in a thinking agent, which is subjective.
Yes.
It's like,
exactly.
Jim's putting his notion of well-being up against God's notion of well-being. Well, duh. But I don't care if it's a God or a king or a president or whatever. If it says, hey, you can own people as property, it is grossly immoral and is not acting in the best interest of human beings.
Yeah.
At least not until they can, show up and make the case for why that's a good thing.
Yeah.